Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Sober is Dope podcast. I'm your host, Pop Buchanan, and I'm extremely excited today to have our special guest on, April Hill. April Hill is the host of the Abuse Recovery Success podcast, and April is going to be talking to us today about her personal recovery journey in relationship to abuse and how she overcame that abuse. So we are very excited on the Sober is Dope podcast. April, how are you today?
I'm fantastic, Pop. Thanks for having me on your show. I'm really excited to be here.
April, man, thank you so much. I'm so excited for all the work you and your team is putting in to spread awareness on abuse and recovery. We're excited and pumped that you're here. For the listeners out there, can you tell us a little bit about your journey, how what led to your addiction, how you got sober, just your personal origin story? You can start wherever you want, but we're interested to hear your story on how you got to this point to where you could use your platform to help people recover from abuse.
Yeah, thanks, Pop. I appreciate that. The thing I want to share most with others, listeners, people who have suffered abuse, people who have gone through addiction, is the ability to find out who you really are through the wreckage and the pain of your past. And for all of us, that can look extremely different. For some of us, that is addiction, and the journey through addiction itself brings shame and so much pain. But for me, my journey really started, at a very, very early age, suffering extreme childhood abuse. My story is a dark one, and I would definitely say that this could be a trigger alert for others. But at an early age, really from the age 2 to 5, I was molested and abused physically, verbally, emotionally, and I also had food withheld from me. Was kept in a closet for stretches of times, and that all blurred together. And part of the pain and recovery from that abuse is the fact that I don't have full memories. I would say I probably have, it's almost like it comes in and shatters and ekes through. Like, almost sometimes I have memories where I can still see the slats of the closet door that I was being entrapped in, and losing track of time. But the abuse is real, and I often tell people I've endured things that most people couldn't watch, and that is my reality. And not to skip ahead in a way, Pop, I'm going to tell you that for a lot of us, I can relate it to abuse. We're going through abuse and we try to block out things, but the reality is abuse can be so dark that you feel like you've seen the inside of hell. And
Yes.
it, it I think when we live in this day and age, and sometimes when we get caught up in the fluff of the world and day-to-day minor problems, we forget that there's a real darkness out there.
Yes.
And that you can find that darkness in people. And unfortunately, my father was the abuser for me. And like I said, it went on from 2 to 5. It was really tough. And from there, after he was out of the picture and I went through the court systems, I was still with my mother and my grandmother, but that was another dysfunctional home front and situation that was really difficult to navigate. My mom suffered mental illness as well as depression, and some things that happened with her that I don't have full access to my memory on. And for whatever reason, I can't access it fully, and I've accepted that for at least this part of my journey. But in and out of my house, I tried to stay a lot with friends, and I never felt like I fit in. One story that I've shared with my own listeners before was just that there was this moment in time where I had been sick a lot shortly after the abuse, 7, 8 years old. And they were taking me to different doctors and trying to figure out what was wrong with me because I was physically ill. And I overheard the doctor and my mom talking and them saying, she might have an autoimmune disorder. We don't know what's wrong with her. She might have AIDS. And I remember as a little girl, we were driving home from the doctor's office, and I was like, oh my God, I really in my head thought I had contracted AIDS. Because, you watch TV, you kind of know what goes on uh, from my Cabbage Patch dolls. Part of,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
because
tough.
part of my story of abuse is, and what happens to children when they go through molestation is they act out with their dolls. There's a play acting. You don't know what to do with what happened to you. So while I was experimenting and doing weird things with my dolls, that ended up, creating such a shame and a fear that my mom wasn't going to love me anymore if she found that out, and I was bad and wrong and unworthy. And why I'm really digging into this is because that feeling, and I'll go back to the journey, is exactly what addiction did to
Okay.
me.
Yes. Yes.
It like created this parallel. So I'm getting goosebumps telling it to you right now, Pop, because at the end of the day, I'm in this horrible space as a small child, feeling like everyone who saw me knew I was, dirty, wrong, bad, not worthy. And I went through, most of my elementary years just being very reclusive, not having any friends, being sick most of the time, and just depressed. I used to get ulcers and stomach aches when the school bus would come. I couldn't even face reality in life. And, I can't tell you what happened, but there was this one day, I think I was looking at my mom who was super sickly, and I just decided I didn't want to be sick anymore.
Mm,
And I can tell you, since that day, I think I was in sixth grade, I probably get one or two colds a year, maybe.
yeah.
And I don't believe in headaches, so I just don't get them. And I know that can sound a little kooky, but I do believe we have a powerful, powerful mind and brain and soul. And when your mind and brain and soul is sick, it manifests through the body in many different ways. So there was
Right.
this moment in sixth grade, for whatever reason, I can't tell you what triggered it, that I just decided to take a little bit of my life back. And I stopped being sick all the time. And, I had some social issues. I was in anger management. I had these moments where I would just break and snap and have to throw something. And I just had this rage inside of me that I didn't know what to do with, because it was the little girl trapped in a closet that had been used and abused, that would flare up and just come out sometimes out of nowhere. And, I went through therapy. I tried to process all of that. Fast forward, I had grown up in Hawaii, and we moved to, my mother, grandmother, and I, we moved to Tucson, Arizona.
Mm,
And
uh,
Tucson, Arizona, kind of honestly, we didn't have much money, shit town, and we lived there. And I quickly got into drugs. I was a freshman, and, I wanted to fit in. And, at first it was just mostly pot. And then, it progressed into like a little bit of acid. It's funny because for me, like, you always know when someone's a partier because they're like, it wasn't that bad. But I mean,
correct.
I was using, but like functionally, I suppose, occasionally a harder drug, but predominantly marijuana. Didn't love alcohol. So often when you're in the rooms of AA, if that's what you choose to use for recovery, um, I hear people say, that first drink, I was off to the races. I've never had that feeling. I can relate
Okay.
to so much that other people have shared, but I was not a huge fan of alcohol. My big drug of choice was marijuana, and I was high all the time though. So, I mean, if I could get high right when I woke up, right after school, before I worked, we didn't have much money. So I worked, every day after school, most days after school, but I went to work high. And, I think I got into that pattern of escaping me. At
Mm,
the end of the day, I always wanted to escape me, and I liked to numb out, and I liked that feeling of freedom that some substance brought to me. And I dabbled with some drinking, and definitely got drunk here and there. I think like maybe some high school kids do, but it wasn't my passion. And then really from there, I went off, and, I made some bad relationship decisions in high school. I didn't have a functional high school boyfriend. That was kind of a twister, semi-abusive at times. And from there, I met my daughter's father right on my graduation night of high school, and ran off, got married, got pregnant. He ended up changing his mind when I was 6 months pregnant, and I was a single mom on my own. And throughout, the duration of my drinking career, I have 3 children. I have a 19-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 7-year-old. Throughout having children, there were moments and times and stretches of some sobriety, but I would say, I always lean towards the party girl. And, if I could escape, if I could get away, get to the party, I would. And definitely there were times in my 20s when my daughter was little, that, I picked partying over her. I got involved with some strange characters, and life was a little bit upside down, to say the least. And I was always willing to try something. Like, I didn't really ever develop too much of a drug problem, but if I was drinking, I would try it. You want to put a line in front of me, I'll do it. And that kind of progressed, and I'd back off, get in, back off, but I was always kind of wild, and I was proud to wear that title. I was proud to be wild.
Yes.
But at the end, like a rebel,
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that was that part of me. I really believe, relating back to the abuse again, fighting back. And all I can say is it got worse and it got worse and it got worse for me. I drank harder. And, my husband now, I met when my daughter was 1.5 years. And we've had a very up and down, back and forth relationship. And at the end of the day, there was a stint in time where we both, partied a lot. And that definitely affected my life. And I think, for me, I was always not good at putting it down. I think other people can go about their business and, maybe party a little bit and then get back to real life. And for me, I really just got sucked into it. And I would say, gosh, there were signs of alcoholic and alcoholism and blackouts and doing some embarrassing things all throughout my 20s. I mean, I passed out at my wedding, at the dinner table in a drunken blur. There was lots of that. DUI, I mean, I don't mean to gloss over it, but for me, the really rough time was really when I was in my early 30s. It just really snowballed. We had a lot of issues in our marriage, and it got to the point where I started to become physically addicted to alcohol. And, I wasn't a very good person. I didn't have my priorities right. My children were not the most important thing to me. Drinking and partying was. And it was like if you could watch yourself just fade away and lose everything you ever wanted to be, and not even be able to look in the mirror. And, we got to this point where I was having issues in my relationship, and I was drinking a lot. We had just moved back to Arizona, and I even attempted to kill myself, with the use of I was really drunk, and I tried to take a lot of Vicodin, just tons of them. And it didn't work. I ended up passing out, but I woke up the next morning and I was the most ill I've ever been. Just, oh my God, the vomiting, everything, and just like the near death feeling. And I just didn't want to be alive anymore. I didn't have respect for myself. I didn't feel okay. And, I continued to drink a little bit more. And then at that point, I went off to a rehab facility. And I went to Sierra Tucson, which I loved. It was probably one of the best experiences of my life. Of course, I didn't really want to go. Getting in there, I was super terrified. It was really, really rough, but the facility changed my life in a lot of positive ways. And I'll tell you this, Papa, during my stay there, I'd get really upset when they would do that relapse prevention. And I'd be like, I don't know why they're doing this. I'm first time, last time, like, I'm done with this. Like, I've got this. This is crazy. Why would they promote this? This is ridiculous. I mean, I could not be more against this.
Yeah.
And I stayed 37 days. I worked it really hard. I was very present. I gave it everything. And when I got out, I got out on Christmas Eve. During the course of my stay in rehab, my husband had sold our house and taken custody of the kids, tried to have me served while I was there. And it was like horrible. I got out on Christmas Eve. I had to stay in a hotel, and I went straight to an AA meeting.
Oh, great.
Yeah, went to a dinner by myself and picked up some presents for my kids, and then waited. And I was able to go and see them the next day. And from there, I ended up fighting to get them back. I willingly dropped for alcohol testing to have ethanol tested, so that way I could prove that no matter what anyone said, the moment I got out, I was sober.
Correct.
You do that every couple of days, and I did that. And I really tried to work a program. I did go to meetings. I found a sponsor, and I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, Pop, but at the end of the day, it didn't work out for me. I held 6 months sober.
Okay.
And I went back out, and it was crazy. I was starting to date my husband again, and again, and love him to death. And he at that time was still partying, but not regularly. And I was around those people. And I remember one night we were out, and somebody put a pill in his pocket, and long story short, I said I should have half of that pill, and even because I never had a problem with ecstasy, I only had a problem with alcohol, so that's what I'm telling myself, because that's the demons talking. But so I ended up going back out, and the crazy thing is, I drank almost normally for a year. I probably would have like 1 or 2 drinks a couple times a week for maybe 6 months, and it was last 6 months, maybe 3 nights a week, maybe once a month getting a little bit drunk, maybe one blackout. And then that second year, oh my God, off to the races. Like the downward spiral, I could not even imagine the depths of my alcoholism. To the end of that second year back out, rewinding a bit, I bought a business right after getting out of rehab. We had, split a lot of our finances, and I decided to buy my med spa, salon spa.
Okay.
So that second year, I almost put it out of business in drinking. And I honestly can tell you, if I hadn't stopped, maybe even a month longer, I probably would have lost it. And I had to work my ass off to keep it. But long story short, I went back out. That last few months, I was shaking in the morning, dry heaving, drinking vodka to get right in the morning, drinking 1 mimosa, 2 screwdrivers, then going to work, blacking out all the time, drunk all the time, red dots around my liver area and my stomach, just not functioning at all, making horrible mistakes, embarrassing myself left and right. And I had some kind of affinity for going out around my business so that people all thought of me as a lunatic. It was horrible. And the thing I really had to learn in getting sober this last time was that I was so used to being ashamed, and that relates back to my abuse. Like, at the end of the day, when you go through trauma like that, there's a part of you that's always comfortable in a deep shame spiral. And I never really thought I was very valuable. I didn't really love myself very much. I don't know that I even forgave myself for a lot of the things that happened to me and that I've done. And I was in such a dark space. I finally, on August 3rd, 2018, I was about to lose the business. I was in complete financial distress. My kids barely wanted to talk to me again. I crawled into the rooms of AA. My old sponsor, they 12-stepped me out of a bar, took me to the emergency room. My alcohol level was like a 0.39. I was walking around. It was pretty bad, and I had to detox on my own. I couldn't afford with business to go into some kind of rehab where I wouldn't have access to my computer and be able to do payroll and things like that. So At the end of the day, I made it out. I would listen to 4 hours a day of AA or recovery related things. I would go to 1 or 2 meetings a day. The first week I was in, sweats, night sweats, because my body was trying to, get the alcohol out of it, and the recovery of those. I wanted to die. My body was covered in bruises from blackout falling, and I was mortified and ashamed. And I felt like I couldn't even look at anyone. And the crazy thing is, I am sober now a little over 2 years. My
Congratulations.
Thank you. My business has turned around. I am happily married. My husband and I are both sober now. My children are happy and thriving. Again, my business is thriving. But I think the thing that set this recovery and this part of my sobriety and journey apart is, not to sound cliche, but you're ready when you're ready. I was finally ready, and I had to have this spiritual awakening and shift in mind, and first and foremost love myself again and forgive myself for some of the things that happened to me as a child,
Mm.
as well as what happened to me as a grown-up and what I've done to others. And my sponsor said a very powerful thing to me. She said, you have to realize, April, that that little girl, like, that didn't happen to you because you were you. It would have happened to any little person in that moment. Like, your abuse isn't your fault. And much like we talk about in recovery, addiction isn't anyone's fault. And I believe it's a disease. And I can't tell you all the reasons why, but many things added up to make this, what I believe and hope and pray and work daily towards being my final stint of sobriety, because I couldn't be more free and happy. And I can't believe that I'm the person I always wanted to be.
Oh.
Like, I never thought I actually would be, but I get to be someone that people respect. And the one thing that keeps me, there's a lot of things that keep me sober, but one thing that really keeps me sober is people don't look at me with that look they used to look at me with anymore. And I think a person in recovery can hear that, because people used to look at me with such pity and disdain, disgust, whatever the different looks are. And people don't look at me that way anymore. And I don't want anyone to look at me that way again. And that little girl that went through all that she did doesn't deserve to have an adult life filled with horror and shame.
Amen.
So
Amen.
that's my story, Pop. That's
Oh man, thank you. That's an amazing story, and I swear I could say, like, every time you was hitting another point, I was saying to myself, I could relate. I could relate, and you're truly not alone. That may be a cliche, but the whole point of our podcast and everything, Give It Back, is to let people know what you've been through or what you're going through or what someone else may be going through. Look, you're not alone. You're not in this by yourself. And I think you were courageous because your early childhood abuse, going through that much trauma at such a young age, can do a lot. It could do a number on people, right? And they say, they had this old phrase with the Tibetan monks, show me 7 years and I'll show you the man or the lady, like, meaning that your first 7 years of life is where all your subconscious programs come from. So, or you was afraid, trapped and going through all of this abuse, and it played out, it manifested itself through addiction, through abusing yourself, these blackouts, and a lot of it was just trauma. It's just this extreme form of trauma that affects the brain and the mind, and it's not your fault. And a lot of people who suffer from intense and dramatic abuse, they tend to feel that way. Like, it's my fault, it's something I could have done. And if you're a child, you probably can't even articulate those type of thoughts. You're just feeling everything. Everything is internalized, right? You feel like you can't share. You feel like you're going to be judged and scrutinized. So, one, I just want to say, I commend you for your strength. I'm sorry that happened to you at such a young age or at all. Abuse is definitely tough, and you're a champion. Looking at you, you're so strong and vibrant. And you know, the one testament I could give you and testimony I could give you about yourself is when we met online and I just look at your profile and all your pictures and stuff, and all I saw was life. All I saw was positive vibrations and beauty and healing. And you look great. It was no signs. Like, so you're such a champion. You beat everything, right? Because you're not wearing it on your sleeve, even consciously or subconsciously. You transcended that whole thing. And look, we fighting every day. 2 years of recovery is a magical time. I remember blacking out. I remember falling on my face. I have one of my greatest stories is the Christmas Eve when I went into when I first was able to. It was Christmas Day. I was in rehab, and I had to reconnect back with my family. I was 5 days in. Started to look better, feel better. I had to go back into the world and start my journey. So my journey started 8 years ago, but that abuse that I was experiencing was self-inflicted. And I was dealing with too much on my own: depression, feeling like I was not worthy, right? Unworthiness, shame and guilt. That's the number one thing. You mentioned something that I love on your podcast, shame cycles. And for me, the shame is what kept me in the addiction, because I would try to get sober, then I'll relapse. And then I'll feel terrible. And I just feel like I'm such a loser. And I will feel like there's nothing that I could ever do to really beat this thing. And I just felt like I was trapped. There was no way out, right? And someone in your case, I know it was discouraging when you had that relapse. And then you went to another 2 years. You try to live with the addiction normally. All right, I'm going to try to casually drink. I got this under control. Deep down, I'm sure you felt that it was just one drink away from going haywire, but you was trying at that point in your own way. You was trying to cut back and mitigate. Me, I had no chill or no trying. My addiction was so crazy. It's like once I started, I couldn't stop. It was the highest extreme of addiction in my case. Like the way I was wired, I think the depression, the anxiety, and the fact that I was allergic to alcohol, like you are, once I started, I couldn't stop. It was just like, and then I couldn't talk to no one about it. All right. I just had to feel if I had to deal with this on my own. And I think now so the topic of sobriety is truly trending in a positive way, where I hope people could feel like they can talk about it, right? You don't have to suffer in the closet on your own. It's that same closet that you suffered in when you was a kid, that abuse closet, right? A lot of adults, a lot of people in life are suffering right now. So what I want to talk to you about, because one, I would say this: you wrapped up your story in such a complete, beautiful, poetic way, and I want to thank you for that, because I think you tapped on everything, and everyone is going to get extreme value from that. So thank you. I just want to touch on a few more points. Can we talk about shame cycles and how shame plays with on the abuser? Like, how does it shame affects the abuser, the addict, and how does that keep us from our blessings, so to say?
Yeah, I mean, the shame cycle is, I believe, one of the most vicious parts of both abuse and addiction. But, you know, I, for me, the shame cycle that I went through, it was played out in every dynamic of my life. So, like, you know, my shame cycle worked even as a younger kid with the anger management. And I had to be in an anger management class. I broke things. I was embarrassed. I went into a shame cycle. Like, it's almost, I'll kind of skip to this. So when I was in Sierra Tucson, they have all this medical side to them as well too. So they had like neurologists, people that would strap your up and check your mind and see how everything's working. And there was this neurologist that tested my brain scans, and they hook you up and they do different stimuli. And I'm laying there, and the guy says to me, he says, "Oh wow." And I say, "Oh my God." I'm thinking, this is a crazy good facility, and they have like people in a suicide ward. So like when he says, "Oh my God, what is he seeing in my brain right now?"
Right.
And I was like, "What are you seeing?" And he's like, "Well, nothing." He's like, "You hit all 5 markers for PTSD." I said, "What does that mean?" He goes, "Well, I'll put it to you this way. It's like most like military vets, people that have been through war, they will hit 2, 3, maybe 4, but you rarely ever see somebody hit 5." And he said, "And it's because your trauma happened at such an early age exactly what you were talking about, Pop, that 2 to 5, that's when your brain's wiring.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, your brain, you don't respond to things the way the rest of the world does. He said, you have a whole different system. And he kind of explained it, and I won't bore you with the details, but long story short, fast forward, I'm in day-to-day life with people, and I would do things that would put myself in a shame cycle from an early age. I'd say the wrong thing, embarrass myself, act out in rage. Fast forward in the addiction, all I wanted was people to like me and to fit in. And like, I'll give you an example. I'd go to a wedding and I would be so upset about how much the father of the bride loved her. And they'd be dancing around, and he genuinely wanted to protect her and care about her. And after what happened to me, and I felt like I must be disgusting and the worst thing, and no one will ever love me like that. And I'd get drunk and ruin the party, or do whatever, and then I'd wake up and feel even worse, right? I'd wake up and I'd be like, not only do I not have a father that loves me, but now everyone at that wedding hates me and thinks I'm a train wreck, because I was acting weird, got drunk, blacked out. So again, in the shame cycle, I think it's just, you've got to recognize that, again, those things didn't happen to you because of anything you did, and you're not at fault. And whether that thing is addiction and a disease and an allergic reaction to a chemical, then that's not your fault either. And of course, we all have a part in this, and we have to do what we can to get better and get well. But I think, for me, the shame cycle, it comes with, helping others, help somebody else. Because if you can help somebody else, you might be able to look in the mirror the next day. And it's those little tiny steps of giving back and being a better person that start to help. And then lastly, what I'll say is, whether you have a higher power or not, I do, and mine's kind of God-based, kind of my own thing. What I did for myself is I almost staged my little girl self with my higher power, and let that higher power tell her she's worthy and that she's okay and she's going to be okay now. And then part of what I do every day is I think of armor being put on myself, especially in the beginning of getting sober. Like, put the armor on, like, God, my higher power is putting the armor on me because he has things for me to do. And that's what got me, like, I've got to help people. I've got to help. For me, it was my children, my staff, for people in recovery. Like, I knew I wanted to find a purpose. And my purpose was, there's so much abuse, and child molestation is not going away. It's still very much there. And there's a lot of people that live with that and in shame and quiet. And I wanted to be a voice that says, I'm not afraid to talk about it. Yes. And that you matter and it's okay. And what you did wasn't your fault. And we're going to, and that's really, sorry to get so impassioned.
No, I love it. Thank you. We encourage that.
Okay.
Yes. Can we talk about sex trafficking? It's at an all-time high now. No one's talking about it. You don't see it in the news. You read all the stories, and this childhood sex trafficking and just in general human sex trafficking is at an all-time high, and that's another form of extreme abuse. And do you have any outreach, or do you talk about that on your platform at all?
Pop, I need to be doing a lot more. So recently I was volunteering with Streetlight USA, which is an organization that rescues girls that are victims of sex trafficking. They're 13 to 17. They rescue them and rehabilitate them. And I was volunteering weekly at the campus. I'm no longer able to do that due to some different time constraints, but my long-term goal is to do something very active in that arena. But you hit the nail on the head. It's despicable how much it's going on. It's very, very prevalent all around the world. There's tons of sex trafficking, and I'm even going to tell you a little story. But basically, in my spa, I have all kinds of clients, and I had a higher end client that was a high up executive for a trucking company. And she said that you're not gonna, because she knew I was volunteering with Streetlight, and she said, April, you would be horrified. She said, it is so prevalent with the trucking. So basically what these traffickers will do is take these kids, children and girls and women that they've trafficked and use them as bait at truck stops all over the US. It's just constant. So she said, we're constantly dealing with it. You just wouldn't even believe the things I've heard about. And I was appalled. So, part of my story is I am, I'm doing my own things right now. My long-term goal would be to actually, create my own charity that did a lot more for, rescuing people in trafficking. But I think if we can find an organization that does and donate money, time, or resources, and then just spread awareness, that's all we can do.
I love it. I love it. Well said. Look at that. That was a lot of insight. Thank you for sharing that with us. Now I want to ask you this. Did you ever have to go to therapy? Did you ever seek proper therapy for your childhood abuse? Did you ever address that specifically as a root cause to a lot of the problems that you experienced later on? And was there any mental health aspects related to the childhood abuse, such as maybe bipolar? PTSD is one.
Yeah.
That's one. Anything else? Maybe depression or anything? Anything you could talk to us about that?
Yeah. So, what happened is the way my abuse got discovered was social workers. The school notified social workers I was exhibiting signs. I ended up being in a lot of therapy as a child. I was constantly, and they would try. The crazy thing is, they would try to get me to act out because it's a big thing with kids. They act out with their toys when they've been abused like that. So it's crazy because, you're smart even when you're 5 years old.
Right,
And
right,
they would put me in these rooms with glass and be like, okay, give me new toys. You're going to play for a while. And then they'd leave. And I'd be like, I'm not going to do anything here. I don't know what these people think. I would never say a word. I never would talk about anything with them. I would never answer any questions. I never acted out. And I would literally go home and do it the whole night or whatever. It's so trippy to me now. I feel
wow,
so bad. I can almost, not to be weird, but I can almost feel bad for that little girl. Like, that's so horrible. All these people wanted to help you, and you were going through it so
right,
deeply, but you knew how to block it and not show it. So, that's another thing people need to be aware about when dealing with children that they suspect might have, been through something. They're not going to necessarily show you. But so I had therapists, and they tried their best, and they were really they had impact in my life. We were in Hawaii, and some would invite us over to their house, and people tried to help me, but I was not able to be reached at that time.
right.
And it wasn't until I was 2021 when I got my first full flashback, oh God, memories of everything that was going on in my childhood. And then they just really, and that probably parallels really well with how my addictions got worse and worse.
Yes, right.
So I would have flashback memories, and I just, I would go to therapy occasionally because I'm not afraid of therapy. But I don't know how to say it without, because I don't discount it. And I think people should get therapy, and I willingly will do that as a routine checkup. But for me, working through the abuse was something I kind of did more in that one rehab facility in my early 30s. We did EMDR therapy.
Yes,
We
yes.
did we did a lot there, and then a lot of it was something I kind of just worked out through making a lot of mistakes. And I know that sounds bad, but I had to kind of follow my own path.
Hey, it sounds great. I mean, it doesn't sound bad because that's your truth, right? And we fail forward, I like to say, in recovery. Like, hopefully, you get to land on your feet. And between those rock bottoms, I think a lot of the lessons and experience is in between these relapses and our rock bottoms. So, being aware of that. Like, I remember if I relapsed twice and really struggled. Then I went on this extremely long stretch where it was just like, and that stretch took me to the ultimate truth of addiction, which is that hell that you talked about. You said it so well. This hell is real, Pop, and that, and most people don't understand that. When we're talking about recovering, we're talking about getting away from that hell, that darkness. I mean, when you talk about waking up the day after you try to commit suicide with the Vicodins and stuff, and that feeling being so close to death. I remember actually, and this is a trigger warning, but I remember holding the blade to my flesh and feeling that cold steel on my flesh and breaking down. And it was just because I was tired. I was so fatigued spiritually, psychologically, emotionally drained because this addiction was taking its toll. It was a pain in the butt, man. And I just was like, I'm done. But then I think the amount of work that it takes to recover, for some people, they may feel like it's just easier to check out. But with a little bit of hope, you could take it all the way and reverse your life and really transform, like in your case. And I think it's such a miracle. So you're 2 years sober. You transformed your life. You got you get kids back. You're in good graces with them. You and your husband as a family is working on recovery. You got your business is thriving, and then you have this podcast. So can you tell us a little bit about the Abuse Recovery Success Podcast and what motivated you to start telling your story on such a major platform?
Yeah, I can. And I have to circle back real quick because
God, go.
sorry, I want to talk about the hell, because you're
The
right.
hell. Yeah,
The
let's talk
hell,
about the
like
hell.
it's people, oh my God, the darkness and how it follows you, the depths of that hell. That's the purpose of abuse recovery success, is
Amen.
to
There we
get
go.
people out of
Uh,
that hell.
That
Because
hell.
I've been there, and it's like you can't even, it's like a cloud over you. You can't even go anywhere and not feel it. And again, it's that shame, but it's so dark. And it's like, I actually was interviewing someone myself today earlier, and she said, she feels like the alcohol is poison, or the devil, or whatever you might want to say. And I had that feeling, and it can claw and ink out any light that you have. And then a big part of abuse recovery success is finding my own light on the other side of my darkness.
I
because
love that.
because when someone goes through the things that I've gone through, there will always be, in my opinion, a little bit of darkness. And I had to find a way to let the light shine in and let myself deserve it. And if I could do that for other people, like the first time I was looking at where my podcast was like being listened to, and there were
Yeah.
people in Asia and Texas,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, what if one of those people was ready to hurt themselves that night?
Right.
What
Right.
if one of those people was ready to give up? Then maybe there was a reason that God let me wake up another day, and I have to give back. I have to help somebody who's been through something, or maybe even a younger girl or someone that's going through abuse and doesn't know how to find her voice or to get help. The purpose of my podcast is just also to have a place where you feel like nothing can't be said. Like, I talk about everything, and I'm not ashamed of the mistakes I've made anymore, because somebody said this, and I might murder this one, but they said, if you wouldn't do what you did before, then you're persecuting the wrong person. Like, if you wouldn't do what you did before, then you're persecuting the wrong person. And I wouldn't do those things. I would
Mm,
always pick my kids first now. I would
mm.
I get to put that behind me,
Yes.
like
Yes.
I do the abuse, and I get to live in this day and be somebody that's valuable and worthy and okay. And if I can let other people feel that way and break those shame cycles, then I was put here for something.
There you have it. I mean, look, I tell you, we survived that hell, and it's a darkness that I mean, I'm glad you wanted to go back there, because my greatest tip for anyone that's in recovery and they want to maintain their recovery, I always say you need to have the brain of an elephant when it comes to the memory of an elephant when it comes to your darkness, right? Because people get real comfortable in their recovery. Oh, I got this now. I got, I'm this new person. I think I can handle it. Then they play with the thoughts in their head, because we relapse mentally and psychologically and emotionally and spiritually before we actually physically relapse. And that's playing with these ideas and fantasizing and not holding your reality firm. And how you keep your reality in check is you remember the darkness and you revisit it in a way where it's healthy to your recovery. So me, I sit back and I go, wow, man, like I remember laying on that cold floor. And, 2 years prior to that, I was partying in my own little mini mansion in Brooklyn, and I was doing well. And then I wound up on this cold floor with no one around me, alone, single, broken, feeling sick, nauseous, sad. I feel like my light was snuffed out, all my potential was lost. And And when I got sober, I started writing like poems and stuff. And I remember writing this thing called Transformations and Miracles. And I was talking about how my transformation was a miracle from God because I threw this Hail Mary in the darkness. And I said, God, I'm done. I'm dead. I'm on the floor. I'm on my knees in the middle of the street crying. This is a true story. This is a sober is dope story. One day I'm just literally just walking in the street and I break down and I give up. And I said, God, I'm done. I can't. I feel like something evil has me captured and I need your help. And I gave my whole life to God publicly. I had nothing. I lost everything. And it was my absolute last Hail Mary. It was like, God, I don't want to die. Help me. And that's when I found grace and a miracle of transformation and a miracle of the higher power, right? And I mean, I knew everything about religion and God at the point, but I
Mhm.
wasn't living that life. It was like as if I didn't even believe in the God the way I was carrying on.
Yeah.
But the little bit of hope I had, I was able to say, I need help. And whether I was talking to my ancestors, the angels, or God, I felt like God said, all right, kid, we heard you. Now let's go. What you want to do? And then I followed that to this day, but I always go back to how I felt right before I broke down that day on the street. That darkness, feeling that emptiness. So if you out there, ladies and gentlemen, and you struggling with abuse or you're in an abusive relationship, one, ask for help. One, don't shame, don't be ashamed, don't feel like it's your fault. If you're struggling with addiction, know that you could get help. If you're in recovery and you feel like you're backsliding, remember the darkness, love yourself, and take the time necessary to heal. And you heard it from the best, April Hill. So April, what's in the future? What's in store for you in the future? And tell us a little bit about what you have planned with the podcast, your life, and spreading the message.
Yeah, so I mean, abuse recovery success is just going to keep going strong. We have amazing guests, and we just focus on trying to help people that are suffering from abuse recovery, all of that. And for me, I guess I have a lot going on. I'm about to, undertake possibly another location for my business
Oh,
and,
nice.
planning and doing all of that. So, we're all navigating kind of strange times right now. I have a
Right.
busy household with kids and managing all that. So I think for me, one thing I've learned too is to not spread myself too thin. I have a tendency
Right.
to do so.
Me
So
likewise.
part of self-care is recognizing that, I love my podcast. We're doing a lot. I love my business, but at the end of the day, my addiction took me away from being a mom quite
Right.
often. So I'm not going to let anything take me away from that job because that's the number one most important job now.
Yes. Right.
And, hopefully we just continue to grow and all get through these really tough times. But being a guest on, your show has been a lot of fun. And, honestly, just even talking to you right now has motivated me to do more.
Hey, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And how are you surviving through COVID? And any advice on how to stay sober through COVID? Any tips to the
Oh,
community?
yeah. Geez, well, first of all, whoever knew I was supposed to be a school teacher, this has been insane for me. But yeah, I think it's just, what my sponsor said that was so funny. She said, April, guess what? When this all kind of first started, she said the whole world is on our program now. And I said, what do you mean? One day at a time.
uh,
And it's like, we don't have it, and also how about the serenity prayer? Like, we have
right.
to control, everything. So
Right.
the end of the day, things out of my control. I just, what I did, honestly, Pop, I stopped. I don't watch the news anymore.
Okay.
Um, I, have been limiting social media time and utilizing staff to help because for me, like, if I can just make my staff happy, my family happy, and spread the voice through the podcast and, help others in recovery, I can't control coronavirus or anything else. So for those out there, and especially those who've been maybe affected, health wise or job wise, I think, not to sound cliche, like this too shall pass. And
All right.
I listen to things all the time. We're here to learn lessons. Like life will find you, no matter sober, not sober. Like you're gonna go through it. It's part of life. So, try to think. I always think when shit was getting crazy, and I didn't feel like it was my fault, whatever business related, whatever, I'd always think, you know what, I am getting refined like a diamond right now. Like
Right.
I am being put through this so I can be stronger. If somebody, I'm not a patient person. If somebody's putting me through something like that, I would think, I need to be more patient. I'm working on this. One day I found myself in so much negotiations, like on 20 things. I'm like, I don't like being in negotiations. And I
Right.
thought, I guess I'm supposed to learn how to negotiate, and
Nice.
you got to just kind of roll with it. It's easier when you roll with it.
I love it. I love it. And April, I will say, like, 2 years of recovery is a sacred time. And I could give you a little advice for me
Yeah.
being a little further. Is you said it. The most important thing is having limits, prioritizing self-love, and I mean knowing how to say no and being comfortable with it, and prioritizing your health and your mental health. So keep the good work up. But I tell people we burn out. It's my personality too. I'm a Libra, and I tend to want to be. I give a lot of myself to others, and I try to be there for everyone. And I just turned 41. About 3 4 on September 29th. This
You look
couple.
great.
Thank you, and thank you so much. And I was saying to myself, you know what? Now is the time in my life where I have to change the relationship with myself and the world. Like I have to put things in perspective, and I have to have real limits. And do
Yeah.
I want to go to this place today? No. Am I supposed to go? Or maybe it's the right thing to do. But if it's uncomfortable, if it triggers you, knowing your triggers and stuff like that.
Mm.
Hey, I learned so much today. Now, lastly, before we go, and I promise you I'll wrap you here. Can you please give anyone out there that's being abused or anyone in the community some advice and tips and words of encouragement? Because every day they may be struggling and this message can get to them. And any love and light we could give to anyone out there that's struggling right now?
Yeah, first things first, it's not your fault. You don't deserve it. You are not broken or wrong, and you deserve peace, happiness, and safety. And sometimes the only one we can count on is ourselves. So if you feel like you went and you've tried to get help in other places with other people and you haven't been able to find that, don't give up. You are worth fighting for, and never ever give up on yourself, because there is a light and a way around the tunnel and the curve, and keep fighting.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from April Hill. April, can you let everyone know where to find you on social media?
Yeah, please find me at April_the hills. And also, if you want to check out our podcast, we have a website, abuserecoverysuccess.com. And I'd love to catch up with any of you guys. We love to support each other. Like I think Pop said, the way we all help each other is staying connected and being there and letting our voices be heard.
Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it from April. That's a wrap for our episode today on abuse recovery. You're listening to the Sober is Dope podcast. Don't struggle alone. I love you all, and we will catch you on the other side.